If I told you we could stop all wars in a matter of days and create some other changes that combined would save our government so much money, they'd be able to lower your taxes and improve your healthcare and improve social security and reduce the national debt. Well, I'm sure you're now thinking impossible, fiction, or even clickbait. But what if it's all real? Here's a true story of how a group of scientists discovered a way to enliven something deep in the subconscious mind of the population of an entire country or even the entire world that causes everyone to remember their true spiritual nature and realize we are far more beautiful than we think. And as a result, everyone spontaneously starts thinking and behaving differently in more loving, more honest, and more peaceful ways. Now that probably really sounds like either science fiction or simply too good to be true, but here's the thing, it is all real. These scientists spent 50 years and over $200 million to prove their technology, showing record long-term reductions in crime rate at 1,000 times lower cost than current methods of fighting crimes, and even influencing wars in the Middle East, making them stop and restart to the exact day as predicted in advance. The US government spent another $30 million to support research on some aspects of their technology, and their proof has been published in dozens of the world's most prestigious scientific journals. And as we'll tell our story, we'll provide all the scientific references so you can confirm for yourself and this is all real. Throughout this video series, we'll show that this could be implemented on a global scale in a matter of months. And yes, the research showed that all wars would stop because not a single person in the world would still have the desire to fight. And the research also shows it would save such a huge portion of the costs that we currently spend on dealing with crime, corruption, defense, and stress-related diseases, that it would actually save our government such ridiculous amounts of money, and we're talking trillions of dollars, that they would easily be able to do all the four things we mentioned at the same time. And we'll show the exact calculations and the research to demonstrate this in this video series. The scientists eventually even created their own political party to bring the message of how this could change everything. And at one point was the largest political party in the world, active in 71 countries. But that was 34 years ago. And what was the reaction to what appeared to be far more effective solutions at a far lower cost? Almost nothing. The research was almost completely ignored or often even ridiculed. Because here's the problem. To understand how this technology works, we need a complete new paradigm of human consciousness, which contradicts almost everything our scientific community has come to believe after 300 years of scientific progress. And history has already shown that people generally don't like to be told their most fundamental beliefs are proven wrong. See, almost the entire scientific community is absolutely convinced that our consciousness is created by mechanical processes in our brain. And in this video, we'll see why that's a logical conclusion based on what they're observing, but it's still the wrong conclusion. Instead, we'll show proof from several different angles that there's a universal field of a higher consciousness that interconnects each and every one of us, and that we're all a part of. And that our brains work more like a radio that expresses signals from this field, like radios express music from radio waves, rather than something that locally creates consciousness. This means that our consciousness is both linked to our bodies, just like music is linked to the local hardware of the radio, and is part of a larger field at the same time. And don't worry, we're going to spend a lot more time explaining exactly how this can work. Now you can think of this as spiritual, but we'll show that it's actually a scientific reality that we can prove. And we'll see that from this perspective, not only the effects we'll discuss in this video series will start to make a lot more sense, but a lot of other fundamentally human experiences start to make more sense as well. You're about to discover some fundamental truths about who you really are, and some fundamental truths about our true human potential, because it's possible to directly access this field. The ancient text describes this not only as a completely natural state of consciousness, but as an absolutely essential experience to develop our full human potential. This experience was lost, however, for thousands of years even, and we'll learn why it was lost. We'll also see that it was recently rediscovered, and that modern research now confirms that this experience creates stronger improvements than anything else ever researched on health, our self-confidence, our brain development, and our happiness, all at the same time. But the most powerful effect of directly experiencing this field is that it stirs the field and enlivens it in everyone around them. So everyone starts to feel more connected to each other and starts to think and behave differently. Suddenly hurting somebody else feels as stupid as taking a hammer with your right hand to strike your left hand. Even the thought to do so wouldn't come up anymore. They don't know why they suddenly change their minds, they just do, completely spontaneously. And we'll see that this effect is so powerful that a relatively small group of people can create the effect for entire countries or even the entire world at a ridiculously low cost. We'll see how they didn't just prove this effect once or twice, but over 50 times, where they not only created the results exactly as predicted in advance, but they also created a much stronger effect, a much higher consistency and reliability, a much lower chance that the effects could have been a coincidence, and a much lower cost than any other social program ever tried. We'll even see how one government already used this technology to turn a 17-year civil war into a 9-year period of peace and record economic growth, or how in another experiment a private donor spent more than $100 million to create the effect for the entire United States for close to 8 years, with remarkable results. In science, there's a saying that extraordinary claims requires extraordinary proof. Well, you're about to see some of the most extraordinary claims you've probably ever heard, and the most impressive proof in the entire history of social sciences to confirm not only these claims, but provide the ultimate scientific proof of a fundamental spiritual reality where we are all interconnected to each other. But first, we'll have to become more familiar with the new consciousness paradigm, so everything else we'll discuss starts to make a lot more sense. So that's what we'll do in the rest of this video. Hi, I'm Joachim. I'm author of the Science of Spirituality book that we now turned into a series of videos, or somewhere between a podcast and a documentary. I spent close to 20 years investigating both this technology, but even more so, ways to explain this new paradigm of consciousness that's so easy that anyone can understand it. Because I think that's a big reason why not everybody's using it yet. Now, I don't feel a strong need to be in front of the camera, so you're not going to see too much of me. But I just wanted to say hi and say that you're in for quite a ride. But I promise you, by the time you're done with this series of videos, you'll feel a hope for humanity that you've never felt before. Enjoy. Consciousness is the juice of life, but where does it come from? Most of us assume that consciousness is created by our brains, kind of like the hardware of a computer creating the software. This seems like a logical analogy. After all, if we put the computer in sleep mode, the software stops working. Damage to the hardware will clearly influence the quality of the software, and if the hardware is broken, it's game over. So this analogy makes sense, but it still doesn't feel right. It would mean that we're nothing more than a sophisticated machine, and we all have experiences that we know machines will never have, like love. We all intuitively know that machines don't love, so there must be something more. The texts from the world's most ancient tradition of knowledge had a very different perspective of consciousness. They claimed there is only one single field of consciousness in the whole universe, and that all life is part of that one field. Think of it in this way. What if we think of ourselves not as these individual separate beings, but as many different individual waves that rise up from one single ocean all at the same time? Each wave has its own life, its own individuality, and yet they're all part of the same ocean that interconnects them. How can this work? Well, simply by thinking of our brains not as computers, but as radios instead. Radios just pick up a specific frequency from an invisible field, radio waves. And fields can vibrate at many different frequencies at the same time, creating different kinds of music at the same time. So imagine we're all radios tuned into our own specific frequencies, so we can all have our own individual music, in this case our individual thoughts. Now, if you think about this, we'll see that the radio analogy actually explains everything just as well as a computer analogy. If we turn the radio off, the music stops, just like with the computer. Damaging the radio will have a clear influence on the quality of the music, just like with the computer. And if the radio hardware breaks down, the music is gone forever, just like with the computer. Well, no, because unlike a computer, the music was never created by the radio. And if another radio tunes into the same frequency, the music will simply continue. We'll come back to that one later. So we now have two possibilities, or paradigms of consciousness as we'll call them, that at least in theory could both work. The brain as a computer that locally creates consciousness, which would turn us into a kind of highly sophisticated individual machine, or consciousness as a universal field with the brain acting more like a radio, and where we would be part of a larger whole that interconnects everything. So which one is correct? For a new paradigm to replace an old one, there are generally two conditions. One, the new paradigm has to provide a better explanation for both the everyday phenomena and any anomalies than the old one. And two, the new paradigm results in better technologies and better solutions for problems than the old ones. These two conditions already created the biggest paradigm shift in history. Once people believed there was an all-powerful higher divine consciousness that decided everything. A god, basically, though it had different names and different descriptions in different cultures. This divine consciousness controlled everything, from people getting sick to weather patterns and everything else. And people believed we were completely separate from this higher being, and our technologies to solve problems were mostly limited to worship, praying, or just accepting things as God's will. We call this the God paradigm. But then the scientists came along, and they provided not only better explanations for issues, for example, why people got sick or why the weather changed, but they also had far better technologies and solutions, like medical experts that can heal you. The more science was able to explain everything, the less any divine power was required to explain things at all, until at least some of us started to believe that there was no higher power at all. The universe was just seen as one giant machine, starting with a big bang and for the rest operating according to precisely predictable laws of nature. We'll call this the machine paradigm. And according to the new machine paradigm believers, every single one of the millions of people that felt some kind of connection or relationship with the higher divine being was basically hallucinating. There was no higher being. The better our technologies became, the more the machine paradigm became accepted as the ultimate truth. It all works after all, so it must be correct. And ultimately, we started even seeing ourselves as machines. In the late 1970s, the development of brain imaging technologies allowed scientists to find such precise correlations between our brain functioning and our conscious experiences that it seemed like a foregone conclusion that our brains produce consciousness. They couldn't actually explain how this happened, but they firmly believed it was just a matter of time before they could. So we're now 50 years later, and how are we doing? In June 2023, an article appeared in Nature, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world, stating that we've actually made no progress at all in explaining how our brains create consciousness. So the whole machine paradigm is still really only based on a belief, and so far a belief without any scientific evidence to prove it, just like the God paradigm was based on a belief. But what if we could introduce a new paradigm, where it's no longer a matter of either believing in a higher consciousness or believing in predictable laws of nature that make everything look more like a machine? What if both can be true at the same time? We will propose there is in fact a universal field of consciousness that creates everything from itself, but not at random, but according to intelligent and precisely predictable patterns that we can identify as laws of nature in physics and chemistry. And while the discovery of these patterns made the pendulum swing towards the machine paradigm, the latest discoveries in physics, especially quantum physics, are now causing it to swing back, with the founders of quantum physics saying that based on what they observed, the universe as a giant interconnected consciousness made a lot more sense than a universe as a giant machine. But we'll discuss this in later videos. We'll discover that this field has the three key qualities that are usually associated with a higher divine consciousness. Omnipresent, meaning it's present everywhere and interconnects everything with everything else. Omniscience, meaning it knows everything there is to know. And omnipotence, it has infinite energy and creativity and can create anything. We will describe this field as an impersonal force of nature, however, and the force of Star Wars would actually be a pretty good analogy. And we are all part of this field, like individual waves on a universal ocean of consciousness. So it's more a spiritual reality than a religious one, and one that can be scientifically verified rather than being based on belief. We'll call this new reality the field paradigm. What's interesting, though, is that we'll discover that our new paradigm actually supports a lot of the fundamental teachings of all religions, showing that there is a lot more wisdom and truth to them than many of us believe today. For example, the fact that hundreds of millions of people today still feel a connection with a higher divine being makes a lot more sense if that connection is indeed there. When we are all waves on an ocean of a higher consciousness, then this means we do have a direct connection to this field. It's just there, whether we believe in it or not. And in fact, we'll see later that it's our connection to this field that makes us uniquely human, different from machines. And that brings us to the machine paradigm anomalies. Yes, we've seen there's a lot of things that make sense in the machine paradigm, like our brain activity matching our personal experience, but there are actually far more things that don't make sense. And the first anomaly is life itself, or more specifically, the concept of a soul that can exist independent from our bodies. Our religions have different views on what happens after we die, whether we go to heaven or hell or simply come back in another body, but they all agree that death is not the end. But according to the machine paradigm, all religions have had it wrong for thousands of years. Consciousness is created by the brain, which means that life is not possible after the body dies. The computer is broken, so it's game over. If the brain works more like a radio, however, then the music would stop if the radio breaks down, but the music itself continues and finds a new expression either when the old radio starts working again or when a new radio tunes into the same frequency. Let's have a look at those two examples. There have been countless of near-death experiences all around the world where the brain is clinically dead and yet the soul is alive and can experience things that it can remember after they come back to life. These experiences shouldn't happen at all if consciousness is created by the brain, and yet there are an estimated 6.5 million of them globally every year. On the other hand, thousands of hypnosis experiments by Dr. Joel Whitton at the University of Toronto have confirmed that up to 90% of people who are hypnotizable have memories of past lives, memories that can be confirmed as actual events by researchers. In his book Life Between Life, Dr. Whitton also described memories of an existence between lives that could be described as heaven. These memories were remarkably similar to the descriptions from near-death experiences, and would indicate that both religious beliefs of a heaven and the belief in reincarnation could be correct. Even more impressive was research with young children who have clear memories of past lives. Dr. Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia started investigating children who remembered their old names, could easily navigate neighborhoods they've never been before, identify their old house, and remember countless of other details that could be confirmed by researchers as actual events. Now, if that happens once or twice, it could have been a coincidence, but Dr. Stevenson recorded 2,500 such cases. The research was so impressive that even the conservative Journal of the American Medical Association, one of the world's top medical journals, stated that thanks to Dr. Stevenson's work, the evidence for reincarnation is difficult to understand on any other grounds. He has a large amount of data that cannot be ignored. Now let's pause here for a second, because this is a big deal. For thousands of years, we've all suffered an incredible double pain whenever a loved one dies, because we'll miss them, but even more so because we believe that a beautiful soul is now gone, forever erased from existence. A belief that is based on the machine paradigm view that our souls are created by our bodies. Yet now they're saying that there's data that cannot be ignored, that our souls live on even after the body dies. You'd think this would create quite a stir, no? Well, no, because the data has been almost completely ignored by the machine paradigm believers. Because when consciousness is created by the brain, it's impossible for life to continue after the computer breaks down. And if it's impossible, that means there must be something wrong with the research that proves it, right? This is the heart of the story of this documentary. When new research data contradicts old belief systems, people rarely change their belief system but will simply ignore, ridicule, or try to discredit the data instead. Even more so when the new research threatens the authority of the old paradigm believers. This is why, at the height of the God paradigm, religious authorities were so strong to suppress the scientists who seriously threatened their authority. It took the church a full 359 years before they issued an apology to Galileo. Likewise, the machine paradigm believers today are the authority in a paradigm where everything can be explained through material processes, and they don't like the stuff that threatens that authority any more than the church did 350 years ago. Let's at least hope it won't take them 350 years to come to their senses, though they're not doing great so far. That JAMA Reincarnation Review was published in 1975. Let's look at some more machine paradigm anomalies. If the field of consciousness has the qualities of omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence, and we are all like waves on this field, then this means we must have these qualities as well. Let's start with the omnipresent quality, which is basically the quality that connects everything with everything else. And here's an obvious question first. If we are all individual waves on this invisible ocean of consciousness that interconnects us, then why can't we experience this connection with each other? Because we can only consciously experience the top part of the wave. All the rest is hidden in what psychology calls our subconscious mind. This is a part that interconnects us, but since we can't consciously experience this part, we experience ourselves as these individual beings, rather than part of a larger interconnected whole. But even then, sometimes something will slip through, and we do have glimpses of our interconnected nature. People sometimes have these weird so-called paranormal or extrasensory experiences, where they think about someone they haven't spoken to in years, and a few minutes later that person calls them, out of the blue. Coincidence? Surveys have shown that 67% of the population have had clear experiences like this. And that's probably an underestimation, because more than 150 years of research has documented that almost everyone has telepathic abilities. But because we can only create the effects from the most superficial level of the mind, the effects are usually too small and inconsistent to be noticeable in daily life, and require detailed statistical analysis to see them. But they do clearly show that consciousness has field properties. Likewise, we can experience the omniscient quality of the field through intuition or a gut feeling, where we know something to be right or wrong, but we can't explain why or how we know. Coincidence? Or just momentary glimpses of that interconnected reality where everything is known. Surveys also show that 70% of the population regularly uses their intuition or gut feelings for important decisions. The omnipotent quality is more related to experiences like prayers sometimes being answered, or manifesting desires, or using the law of attraction as described in the international bestseller The Secret, which sold over 30 million copies worldwide. So what was the reaction of the machine paradigm believers? Still a large part of the scientific community today, though far from everyone. Same reaction: ignore, ridicule, or actively try to discredit the data. They label any scientist that wants to study these phenomena as pseudoscientists, as in not serious science, while the people who have these experiences are hippies or new agers or anything that will convey not serious people. The only people that are serious are those who stick to their materialist paradigm belief systems and think like them. And so they use their authority as scientists to ridicule and shame everyone else, even if that is the vast majority of the population today. They are all just imagining things. There is no higher consciousness. There are no souls. There is no invisible connection to each other. We are machines that locally produce consciousness, and we should stop wasting our time with anything that even smells like spirituality and just go to work and pay our taxes. And then we die. And if that makes us a little anxious or down, hey, we've got a very good machine paradigm solution for that. Ta-da! But in their defense, there is an important nuance here. The core principle of science is that an effect should be consistent, reliable, and repeatable. and all the research we discuss generally does not fit these fundamental criteria. Hypnosis studies with past life memories often reveal false memories or downright hallucinations. Only a small percentage of children have reliable past life memories that can actually be verified. So if this is real, why don't all children have them? Intuition is notoriously difficult to research because it happens so rarely and it's also not always reliable. And we've already seen that telepathy effects are so weak they're barely noticeable in daily life. So they're not completely wrong to label these phenomena as not serious signs, although it's of course also a very convenient excuse to dismiss the whole area altogether so nothing can challenge their machine paradigm authority. But what if there was research that confirmed the field properties of consciousness that did show clear effects in daily life and was actually reliable and repeatable? Well, then there would be no excuse for them anymore. We'll get to that. And this starts with another way to experience our connection to each other. One that's not paranormal or esoteric, but is the most fundamental and most beautiful experience we can have as human beings. We call that experience love. What is love? Love is just an experience of feeling connected to someone. With some people, that connection is so strong that it will slip through our subconscious minds so we can consciously experience it. Love is both the ultimate human experience and the biggest machine paradigm anomaly. Machines don't love. In fact, love is the one experience that will always separate human beings from machines. With other people, that connection may be more subtle. Maybe we just want to help someone else. Machines will never do this, but us human beings have this inexplicable desire to help. And that is just when we can only experience the top part of the wave. Just imagine what would be possible when we could experience our full potential and consciously experience the entire ocean. Then we'd experience everyone as part of ourselves and would spontaneously experience the unconditional love that our religions talk about. So how can we develop our full potential? If we are indeed like waves on an ocean, then there is a way to let our wave merge with the ocean and have a conscious experience of the field itself. The ancient texts claim that experiencing this higher consciousness part of ourselves is not only possible, but it's a completely natural state for us, and it's actually absolutely essential to have that experience on a regular basis in order to develop our full human potential. The text also described a surprisingly simple technique to create this experience at any time at will, but in the next video we'll see how this technique was misinterpreted and eventually lost to mankind, and was only fairly recently rediscovered again. And it's this rediscovery that's at the heart of our story, because we'll see how research now shows that it has stronger effects than anything else ever researched on stress in our health, our self-confidence, our happiness, and our brain development, all at the same time. And yes, these effects include completely rewiring our brains so we can learn to eventually have that experience of our connection with each other 24/7, as we'll see in later videos. But even these effects pale compared to the consciousness field effects that this experience creates. It was found that experiencing this field stirs it, creating powerful waves, kind of like jumping in a lake and watching the waves spread over the entire surface. This means that the subconscious connection that we all have with each other gets enlivened, so we actually feel more connected to each other and we start thinking and behaving differently. We'll see that this creates powerful, measurable effects for society that will fulfill the fundamental criteria of science that we discussed earlier as proof that consciousness is indeed a field. But far more importantly, if people would spontaneously start to act in more loving, honest, and peaceful ways, it would change everything. But we'll come back to that. Let's first have a look at why exactly the technique to reach this state was lost in the first place and how it was recently rediscovered.